Well, I didn't think I'd be making this video straight away today, I'm going to be honest, because in a surprise turn of events, Haas F1 have decided to launch their 2018 car somewhat, in an online launch basically, a lot earlier than anyone expected. They were actually the last team to announce when they were going to release their car. It was going to be Williams going first on Thursday this week later on, but yeah, Haas out of nowhere have just sprung their new car launch. So here is the 2018 Haas. It's a CFD render, so I think there's definitely going to be a lot of stuff that's not on the car that will be on the car there for preseason testing and Australia. So as is the case with all these launch cars for every team, you have to take it all with a big pinch of salt. These cars will change rapidly, not only to preseason and throughout preseason, but then also straight away Australia for the first race, and it's going to change the evolution of the car, and we've heard that plenty of times before in seasons gone by. But yeah, welcome to another round of Let's Talk F1, specifically Let's Talk F1 2018 and analysing the cars. If you're new around here to my channel, you don't know what that is and you don't know what this series is, older viewers will know what this is all about. But every single year for the past 2 years when the cars have launched, I've been doing aerodynamic analysis on the cars. Not very in-depth stuff, but I am a graduate of aerospace engineering, so I somewhat have a quote-unquote basic concept of what's going on these cars compared to maybe the actual proper analysis guys that do this for a living. Obviously, this is just a side thing on my channel that I like to do at the start of every year, but obviously being an engineering graduate, I find it very interesting, and I did a dissertation on front wing to front wheel interaction. So I was actually researching what the teams were doing for 2017 onwards. Obviously, the aerodynamics haven't actually changed majorly in terms of the regulations, the rules. So you'll probably see nothing majorly striking if you just quickly glance at the car. The biggest thing is going to be the halo, and obviously just the livery of the car. A lot of people on Twitter already saying, in terms of let's get the looks out of the way, a lot of people on Twitter already saying probably the best looking Haas livery they've done so far. I would tend to agree, actually. I like the kind of clean lines they've gone with, especially on the side pod there with the Haas writing. And obviously you can note, along with the halo, the shorter shark fin, but plenty of shark fins still there for them to get the lettering on and for it to still kind of be there. And I don't know, I mean, I've said it in previous videos, I'm not too fussed about them getting rid of the shark fins, but I also got used to them and kind of like them in a way. So I'm kind of 50-50, so do let me know what you guys think about the way Haas have tackled that. They've chosen to kind of have it very different, just in raw carbon fiber, it looks like, polished carbon fiber probably by the time they launched the car compared to the rest of it. And also the halo, they've not decided to paint it, which is a little bit disappointing in my opinion. I think they could have blended the halo in a lot better if they had painted it the same grey as they did for most of the car. But that's the visuals and aesthetics out of the way. But obviously do let me know what you guys personally think of the look of the car in a visual way. But let's get on to then the actual a bit more nerdy and technical side of the video then, looking at this car aerodynamically. So we're going to go through each photo, and in Photoshop I've basically used some of the levels in Photoshop to kind of blow out the photos in terms of the light, because a lot of the cars, a lot of the teams, what they like to do is they try to act very kind of like all secretive and kind of put lots of shadows on the cars, and you can just go into Photoshop and you can just turn up the brightness, turn up the contrast, and you can kind of get a lot of good detail there. It's going to be a little bit blurry on the video probably, but it's the best we have to work with. Unfortunately, it's 2018 and F1 teams still don't know what proper high-resolution photos look like. Maybe they do it for a good reason, so people like me can't actually look at these things properly, and proper journalists can't look at them properly in detail and pick out the secrets, if you will, of their cars. But I don't know, it's going to be a little bit blurry in the video, but as always with the aims of these videos, they're not going to be bang on, spot on or anything like that, just trying to give you a little insight maybe to why the car looks the way it does. So we're going to start with the front of the car then. So we're going to go from left to right. So on the left hand side of the car, we've got the kind of inward part of the front wing, and the right side we've got the outward part. So the inward part, obviously at this point now, we saw it in 2017 with Force India rocking up with so many different levels of flaps, and pretty much now every team is kind of, because there's no regulation change, it means that they can all kind of converge on one point in terms of the complexity of the front wing can only get so much, especially for the middle part of the front wing. The actual more complex kind of ingenuitive parts of the front wing actually happen on the outside, because that's a very big part of the new aero regulations that we've had since last year about getting air around the tyre, cleaning up airflow coming off the tyre and going on downwards towards the diffuser and just generally downstream of the entire car. Whereas the inside bit, in terms of what they can actually do a little bit different, differently. Obviously, there may be little angles that change, little twists and turns of the flaps that teams might try and do to try and affect the airflow in certain ways to make the vortice bounce in a certain way to the inside of the car. But generally, all the teams do converge on, now you have all teams using around 6 flaps, 7 flaps even, and really even getting to splitting the main plane. You can see the main plane, which is the kind of simpler part of the very front of the front wing, right under the nose cone. You can see starts to also become flaps themselves straight away as they get outwards to the outside of the front wing. But what you can't see from this angle as well, underneath these flaps on the underside of the front wing is actually where most of the work goes on, in terms of that's where all the air is coming from, underneath these flaps, as air goes from above to inside through these little slot gaps. Due to the slot gap, the air gets accelerated, and so it's more prone to kind of suck basically and create that downforce in the front end, but more so also encourages mixing of the airflow. And basically, when you have turbulent air, you want it to mix to try and get it to smoothen out. So that's what a lot of these aero devices do, is they're trying to just mix air, encourage it to mix to smoothen out as much as it can, because the smoother you can get the air to go towards the diffuser, the better the diffuser is going to work, the better the underside floor of the car is going to work, as smooth as they can get it. So that's what the aim of the front wing primarily is. It's a flow control device. It's trying to smoothen out the airflow and control it into certain places, rather than being just an outstanding downforce creating device on these cars. So they're going to try and affect as much flow to that inside, with the inside bit of the front wing, and especially this year with the Haas, they've really made a step up on the side pod area of the car, which we'll see in later angles. They've effectively, it's been said before, that they rely heavily on maybe mimicking, Ferrari. They say mimicking and copying is the best form of flattery. I don't know if it's flattery per se, more so they obviously have a link with having a Ferrari engine in the back, and I don't know if Ferrari mechanics leave out CAD designs just lying around, but certainly the Haas has evolved very much into what a kind of Ferrari car looked like last year, just like what the Haas was in 2017 with the nose and the shape of it, of what it looked like from the previous Ferrari of the last year. So, yeah, it will leave that on the table in terms of, that's a different argument in terms of how much help and how much, of a customer team almost has become of Ferrari due to them having that backing of the engine there in that department. But yeah, they'll send flow to that side pod area, and that is a big area for teams to develop. You'll see the top teams being very, very clever with their area, because with the new aero regulations, because they're allowed to do so much more now compared to pre-2017, they can do so much more. And actually, due to the front wing being wider and more aggressive, the vortices to that inside of the car, into the side pod area, are actually so much stronger and neater than they ever were 2016 backwards. So the fact that the vortices are a lot stronger and neater means also whatever you do in that area is going to be a lot more effective than it ever was in 2016 and before it. So now we move on to the right hand side of the car. So now we're looking at these streaks that go in the outward motion, and you can see at the very bottom you've got that little kink in the bottom of the front wing, all those little divots and turning vanes and cascade elements, all trying to channel the air to this outside pocket. In green, I've got basically where the airflow is, if you hadn't already noticed, and the yellow is basically the detailing of the car itself. So they're trying to get it all towards this vortex that forms on the outside of the tire, around there roughly. There's also a bit of stretching of a vortex down below, but that's kind of the main area where I've circled it basically. And that vortex, they're trying to strengthen that vortex as it goes across the sidewall of the tire, and then what they're aiming to try and do is try and smoothen out airflow as it goes downstream towards the diffuser, down towards just the back end of the car basically. And so the best way I can describe it is almost like they're trying to create a wall of smoother air, and so the turbulent air of the tire effectively is controlled somewhat to the best of their ability by this wall of smoothened air they're trying to create from this vortex as it goes downstream. And that's just going to help the efficiency essentially of the entire side pod area and the efficiency of the diffuser, because you're taking away as much turbulent air and encouraging mixing of all that air as it goes downstream. If we move to the left hand side, you can see what I was talking about, the Ferrari mimicking. Haas have now gone with a very much mimic of what Ferrari did last year, what Ferrari will probably continue to do this year, I would imagine, which is kind of split opening almost of the side pod there. They've got a winglet that goes across in front of the side pod, and I would imagine they've got a split compartment just like Ferrari did, where they kind of divide the air to go either towards the kind of to either go towards the radiator cooling or go into a specific part of the engine they want to, whether it be, I don't know, the turbo or whatever they want it to go to, just cooling electronics, what have you. They've split that opening and they've got that element wing going across the opening of the side pod, which worked really well for Ferrari. It was a very ingenious way to design that from Ferrari last year, and was one of the biggest kind of impressive things about that Ferrari car compared to the Merc, which actually looked a lot more simpler compared to the Ferrari in that specific area of the car. And so Haas have mimicked that, and they've also mimicked, as we move on later, you'll see they've mimicked the side pod area very much in terms of the square nature of what Ferrari did last year. We move on to the backside shot here, and you can see what I mean now. If you look towards the right-hand side, just on the left of all the arrows from the tyres, that's just showing off the turbulent air coming off there, and that vortex in green coming off the front wing. They're trying to smoothen that air as it goes downstream. But you can see now that area where essentially Ferrari had that. It was sponsored by, I think it was Sing Beer, I think, at the time. And so Haas have effectively mimicked that. They've done their own styling to it. It's a lot less of a solid wall than Ferrari had. Ferrari had pretty much a solid winglet wall that had slot gaps in it, whereas Haas's was almost just a case of 5 different winglets and cascades connected together by a thinly kind of spine, if you will, that's connecting all of them in a row there. And all of that will be in a bid to affect airflow, either going towards the diffuser or on the outside face, trying to shoot it to the outside of the rear tire and trying to create the best divide they can from, air going into the diffuser and then air going past the rear tire on the outside face, because the more separate they can get that, the better the diffuser is going to work, because it can be working in isolation, and effectively they're going to create a vacuum slot gap almost between the inside face of the rear tire and the rear wing. The physical slot gaps themselves on the floor, you can see right in front of the rear tire, does the same thing. They're trying to create a vacuum seal effectively between the diffuser and the rear wheel and the whole rear wing structure, and trying to create that vacuum means the diffuser can work so much more efficiently to just suck down that car into the road when it's going through these corners at such high speeds. Going through the simpler stuff, which doesn't really need much explanation because that's been there on F1 cars for years now. You've got the slot gaps on the rear wing trying to send air and bleed air down towards the diffuser to help it and aid it. You've got that usual underbelly of this side pod trying to get it swooping as much as they can and smoothing it, and then you've got that Coke bottle shape of the car. Obviously the bigger teams kind of do a better job of it. Haas, we see from the top down view a little bit later, you can see they have to open it up a lot more, whereas we've already heard reports of the way the Renault engine is going to be packaged. Teams like McLaren can go with their size 0 Coke bottling shape, as they have been doing a lot of the time, where they're getting it to pretty much the narrowest edge they can get it as they go towards the tailpipe of the engine. And then simpler things, again, a little bit better of a look of the actual shark fin itself, cut down, trimmed down from what it was. It used to look like a bit of an abseil, I guess people described it as. And then just a thing to note from the halo is a big task of the teams this year with the halo is going to be, how do they go about separating air? They need smooth air going into the engine, going into that engine exhaust, which also, by the way, I forgot to actually mention from the front view, it looks like Haas, the engine inlet they've got is kind of copying the Mercedes style, the bigger kind of inlet, basically trying to help cooling overall of that Ferrari engine. And so the halo, it's a tricky thing. They have to try and get air as smooth as it can into the engine and not have that be turbulent air going in there, and then they have to try and push the other air around the outside. And so what at the moment is lacking on the Haas is any kind of fairings, really. There's no aero winglets, there's no any trickery they've done with the halo to kind of dress it up, whereas you can dress it up, you're allowed to within some limits. And we've already heard teams like Mercedes in videos they put on Twitter with guys like Allison talking about they're allowed to put fairings on, and they will do, but it's going to be something that maybe they catch up within half a season. That was, I think, a quote from Prodromo of McLaren stating that the lower teams are going to have to catch up a little bit, but it's not going to be a huge catch up. Within half a season, I expect most teams to have caught on to what the best way is to dress up the halo to kind of, alleviate any kind of problems with air going to the exhaust, going to the engine bay, or going around it to the outside, and, trying to basically just push it away from where they don't want it to. If we look from the top-down view now, you can get a better sense of that entire side pod area, and you can just see how intricate it is, obviously, from last year. But if you compare the Haas to the Haas I'm talking about, you can see Haas have definitely made that little jump to get more complex, but, the problem is going to be the top teams are definitely going to be even more complex, probably, I would imagine. You would say so, usually, typically. But here, from the top-down view, you can see that Coke bottle shape on the rear end, but you can see also that opening. I've highlighted this little straight panel. It looks like a panel from this angle, but it's actually essentially a little T-wing on the underside. Now, the T-wings were banned from the shark fin side, but there's still this area where they can work with in between the two rear tires. And we saw Williams have this bottom T-wing last year, and so it looks like Haas have gone with that bottom T-wing, where they're just trying to aid the rear wing, basically. They're trying to improve the efficiency of the rear wing, essentially, by helping get upwash, and effectively that entire area then is going to be aided by that upwash effect on the underside and allow the entire rear end to just get slammed down even harder into the ground to create downforce. So, little T-wing there. You might see most of the teams actually run that. Probably Williams definitely will, because they ran it last year as well, but I'd imagine maybe the top teams are going to probably, you might see some really weird bonkers things. I would imagine, I would hope, kind of, just for the case of curiosity. But again, in green, just towards the front end of the car, again, just trying to, simply illustrate what I was mentioning beforehand about that interaction, the front wing and the front tire, trying to get air turning around to that vortex area where they can smoothen out the airflow on the outside, and on the inside, they're just trying to get it towards that side pod area where it can obviously get to work and go into either the inlet of the side pod or work its way around to the outside or even underneath the car. A lot of the work is going to be underneath the car. Unfortunately, with these car launches, you never see the underside, and there's a good reason, because a lot of the work actually goes underneath all these winglets, underneath the car, underneath the chassis, and that's all very secretive stuff, and stuff that even, usually analysts on TV don't even get a chance to see unless the car has crashed and it's on a crane and you can look on the underside there. But there's a lot of work going underneath the car as well that you can't really see, but a lot of that side pod work will also be for the underneath part of the car. We move to a front angled kind of end, and here again on the rear end you can see that little T-wing at the bottom there, just by the 8 of Romain Grosjean's number 8 on the shark fin. If we look to the front, this is a little bit odd, because I almost can't see this winglet from the front view. You can't see it from the top down, so I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if my eyes are deceiving me, but from this angle at least, I don't know if maybe they chopped it off in some other CAD renders, but to me it looks like they've gone for a Mercedes snowplow almost kind of thing. Obviously Mercedes had this snowplow feature that went from the front of the nose all the way back of the car, the front end, and it looks like Haas have gone for effectively a smaller version of it, starting not at the front of the nose, but rather just by the Pirelli part of the sponsor there. And so it's a smaller little snowplow area will try and aid as much air to get towards that bargeboard area and the side pod area. And also with that, there'll be slot gaps in that little snowplow area that'll also allow air to pass through those slot gaps, accelerate and go underneath the car. And again, a lot of the work is then going to get done underneath the car, literally underneath where the driver sits is going to get pushed either left or right underneath and do work underneath in the floor. And again, from this angle, you can see that really nice complexity of the mimicking of what they've done with the Ferrari whole split side pod thing, and then the slot gaps again on the rear end of the floor, and a bit more of the intricacy of how the bargeboard meets the floor / the side pod area. All gets very technical for Haas this time round. There was some joking about Red Bull copying Ferrari for Singapore onwards with their bargeboard, but now Haas has kind of set the precedent of, I think, pretty much every team. I would hope even Sauber, Alfa Romeo are going to have some good complexity on this side pod here, but it also begs the question, how bonkers are the top teams going to be? And then again, now finally from the complete side-on view, it looks like from these CAD renders, Haas are going to go with the blown wheel nut. Pretty much most teams now go with the blown wheel nut. There may be some races where they actually take it off. We've seen that many times in the past where Red Bull have had the blown wheel nut. Some races they've not had it. Some other races effectively allowing part of the brake duct. Some of the air won't even go to the brakes. It will go straight through the wheel nut and pass through the wheel nut and get exited like that. And that will again try and help smoothen that flow as it goes downstream. But from this angle now, you can really see the bargeboard a little bit better with the slot gaps in there to cut some drag and a drag there and let air just pass straight through. And you can see a lot better now that kind of weird, how do I describe it, wall of the side pod, which it's not like a wall anymore. It's, as I said, it was kind of like 5 different flaps that are connected together by a spine compared to the Ferrari of last year. And then again, just, pointing out that halo, you can just see the issue there of that bump of the top of the halo coming just into reach of what would have been a straight line air flow straight into the engine through the opening of the engine cover. So that is going to be a difficult thing that teams are going to try and navigate. And at the moment, Haas just have a very simple halo. Even though in their press release they said the halo definitely helped shape some of their car. I don't know what they're on about at the moment because I'm not seeing much of it. I think we'll probably see a lot more of it in pre-season maybe and what they're doing. And from this angle now you can see the interesting mounting that Haas have gone with. They've used the kind of almost like two arms, I'll describe it as, that kind of leap over as if they're coming out of the floor and they just grab onto the rear wing there on the end. So that's the mounting they've gone for. Other teams beforehand obviously have gone for 2 pillars or 1 pillar. It's got its different advantages obviously. And in terms of the way they package it, sometimes teams like to put it in between. You've got the little 3 little pipes from the exhaust. You've got the 2 smaller wastegate pipes and the main exhaust pipe. Sometimes teams like to put the 2 pillars in between those and work that through. Of course, for 2018 now, there's no monkey seats anymore. So that's going to be something you don't see anymore in that area of the car. So that just may be a way of them playing around a little bit. Also, just in terms of the way they're structurally making the rear end of the car, you know, other teams might go another way. Haas have decided to go for this kind of double-armed stretch kind of manner. So that has been my analysis video on the Haas for F1 2018. So yeah, surprise video today. I didn't even know I was going to make this video. Just popped up on Twitter randomly that Haas launched their car. So thanks for that, Haas. Just springing that all on us. So yeah, if you have enjoyed the video and did find it informative, then do hit the like button. If you're new around here and found it informative, then do get subscribed. And obviously, usually I do a lot of gaming stuff on the channel, but this is definitely something every single year I like to do for every single car. So do get subscribed if you want to see these similar sort of videos for every single car launch coming up for the F1 2018 season. We also have a F1 podcast that goes every single week once the season gets underway, so that might interest you as well. Yeah, let me know what you thought of the Haas in the comments below. And once again, if you are new around here, do get subscribed, hit that like button if you did enjoy it, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.